Welcome to the School of Rock Bottom with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist, a performing arts school principal, and a mental health coach. And it's these careers and passions combined that have given birth to this podcast. Those working across the creative industries are 3 times more likely to have a mental health problem. And those working in performing and entertainment are 15 times more likely to suffer with anxiety and twice as likely to suffer with depression. So as you know, on this show, I invite incredible creatives that have had a rock bottom but survived. And they're here to tell you loud and clear that there is hope and there is a way out. And I'm really excited because I have got the resplendent Robert Hands in the studio.
I've never been described that before. I like it.
I like to use an adjective to start off, you know, and definitely resplendent is for you, I think.
Yeah.
Before we kind of get straight into it, I'm just going to give the listeners and viewers a quick bio, if that's all right, just to give a bit more context. So Robert Hands trained at Bristol Old Vic and has been an actor for 35 years, appearing in leading roles in film, theatre, television and West End musicals. He was most recently seen in Come From Away in the West End at the Phoenix Theatre. Other theatre work includes scenes from An Execution at the National Theatre and My Fair Lady. He also played the lead in the cult horror film The Lesson, as well as appearing regularly on TV in Endeavour, Berlin Station, Noughts and Crosses, Tom Jones, and the yet-to-be-screened Masters of the Air for Apple TV. Watch this space on that one. Amazing. He also played Sir Robin in the original London cast of Spamalot. He is probably best known for his television roles in Sharp's Battle, Doctor Who, and The House of Elliot, as well as the films Charlotte Grey, Anna and the King, and the Academy Award-winning Best Picture Shine. He is also a member of Edward Hall's world-renowned all-male Shakespeare company, Propeller. Wow. The crowning being nominated, or I should say the crowning moment, I should say, being nominated for an Olivier Award for Come From Away. It's incredible. I actually think Robert's been quite modest here because, unbeknownst to him, I've actually printed off his CV, and it's a Goliath of credits. I'm just going to pick out random ones: Father Brown, EastEnders, Casualty, Doctor Who, Grange Hill, Peak Practice, Theatre. Look at some of the theatres he's played: Abbey Theatre, Dublin, Salisbury Playhouse, Donmar Warehouse, Noel Coward Theatre, Trafalgar Studios, Hampstead Theatre, Palace Theatre, Regent's Park, Old Vic, The Globe. It just goes on and on and on. Wow, what a CV. I'm so delighted you're here today.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
I should probably just put a little trigger warning in here that we may have references to drug use and, in particular, intravenous drug use. Robert, I've invited you on because I know you've had a rock bottom in your life. I just wondered if you don't mind if I cut to the quick and ask you maybe the hardest question of the podcast to try and take the listeners and the viewers to that moment, and then we'll just pan out from there, if that's all right.
Sure, absolutely. I was, as you just mentioned, I was an intravenous crystal meth addict. It was something that I never thought I'd take crystal meth, and I certainly never thought I'd inject it. But I did both those things a lot, and my life imploded very, very quickly from first picking it up to the rock bottom. I'm not particularly clear on the chronology, but about 3 years from first picking it up to literally losing everything of any value whatsoever. I was sort of aware that the circumstances of my life were getting worse and worse and worse, but I didn't think it was the drugs that had caused that problem. I thought it was everything else. I didn't work as an actor for, I think 3 years. I don't think I worked for. There is a gap in my CV when nothing happened. I wasn't able to. I sort of lost all faith in my abilities, really, and I can remember scripts arriving and hoping that the part that had been suggested for was a small one, so that I didn't have to actually take too much time out of my drug use, which I couldn't have anyway. And with that sort of attitude, you're never going to get on as an actor. There's far too much competition. There's far too many brilliant actors out there on their A game. So I was never going to work, and indeed I didn't. So I had no money, and my relationship ended as a result of it, and I lived in this flat that needed total renovation, and I couldn't afford to do it, didn't have the skills to do it, and I had this sort of sick feeling at the pit of my stomach that I didn't really want an acting job. I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I'd be able to perform if I was asked to. And then I thought, well, what else am I going to do? I don't have any skills. I've only ever been an actor. I don't really know what to do. And my friends had given up on me. They disappeared because people will be fobbed off multiple times, but there comes a point when they just stop ringing. And there I was, backed into this little corner of a really grubby, derelict flat, which incidentally I bought. My partner and I sold the flat that we lived in, and there was a certain amount of equity, and I was more or less able to buy it outright. It was a tiny studio flat, really. And I bought it in Camden because I thought I could open the window and flag down a dealer. That was my genuine rationale for doing it. And at the back of my mind, I sort of did know that I should stop it. I should, but I just couldn't. I couldn't muster the resolve that was required to ask for help and get on with it, because I couldn't see beyond my situation. I couldn't see any hope. And it's really interesting. There was no love in my life. There was no love for my job. There was no love for my friends. There was no love for my career. There was nothing. There was just me and this drug, which, as I said, I never thought I heard about it. I can remember hearing about it, and I'm a gay man, and I hooked up with a guy, and he said, "Here, why don't you have a puff of this?" And I said, "Ooh, what is it?" And he said what it was, and at no point did I think, best not. So I had some, and at that moment I told myself the lie that I was in control of it. I can remember thinking, it's fine, I'm completely in control of it. But I wasn't, because from then on I was obsessed with, when am I going to get some more? And finding people, online who looked like they might. I started sort of getting good at working out the guys that were doing it, and it became about that rather than what they looked like. It became about, were they going to have the stuff,
right?
As I say, I remember the first time someone suggested to me, would I like to inject it, and I said no, absolutely not, no, of course I don't. But within 2 hours of that, it happened. And within a few weeks of that, I was doing it to myself.
Wow.
And all the stuff that goes with that, which I didn't know existed. There's a whole thing about I became obsessed with needles themselves and veins. And I found myself eyeing up people's veins if they were wearing short sleeve shirts or whatever, thinking, wow, that's a great vein. Bizarre sort of trains of thought I never thought I'd have, but I'd never thought I'd be that guy.
Right.
And I really did lose everything. I lost everything within 3 years. I suppose I had the flat, but it wasn't really fit for habitation. I didn't have any money to put it right. I seem to have lost all my possessions. I don't know where they went, but I didn't have those anymore. And there was no work, and there was no money, and there was just this obsession with having this stuff. And then one day, I was using with this bloke, and he said, "This is my last time." He said, "This is it. I'm not going to use after this." He said, "I'm about to be 50, and the likelihood of having a stroke increases manyfold with injecting, seemingly. Whether it's true or not, I don't mind, because it got me to stop. I don't know why. I don't know why that hit. It was like I had someone throwing down the gauntlet, and I thought I thought, right, okay, I'm going to do it. Well, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I can't explain to you. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know. I used to have to rehearse what I'd do when I entered the flat, and the flat wasn't very nice. I didn't really like being in the flat. But when I got back to it, I thought, right, when I get in through the door, I'm going to walk to the kettle. I'm going to have what was I going to have, whatever. And then I'm going to sit on the, I didn't have a sofa, sit on the floor. And I'm going to, whatever. And it was the only way I could sort of get myself through it, just planning, second by second, really, without using. And it's nearly 10 years ago that this happened.
Wow.
And it still frightens me when I think how difficult that was, and the thought of it, going back to it, really terrifies me. And after about a few weeks, crystal meth has a very long shelf life. When you take it, you stay up for days and days and days. I can never remember how much I took. That's the problem. But, I'd be up for 3 or 4 days. That's for sure. And then it would stay in my system for, I think it stayed in for many, many months, actually. But until I kind of felt straight again.
Yeah.
Certainly a couple of weeks. And sometimes I did that. And then once I felt okay, then I did it all over again.
Right.
So anyway, I'd made this decision. I was going to stop doing it, and I don't know where that decision came from, because I didn't think that all the problems with my life were to do with the drugs. I thought they were to do with everything else. So I didn't really think that was the root of the problem. But for some reason, I decided that I was going to give it a go, seriously give it a go, and I remember thinking, I'm going to go out of my head. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I went to the cinema, and I went to see some film, and wouldn't you know it had someone injecting drugs in it. It seemed to be everywhere I went. I couldn't get away from it. I reckon 6 weeks after not taking it, and I had some really close calls. I remember texting the dealer, thinking, I can't do it. I'm going to have some. And I texted the dealer and waited. And then I looked, and it said, "Message failed to send." I've no idea. So then I sent it again. And I was waited. And then the same thing happened. And by that, I'd sort of got myself together again. And I kind of thought, all right, I'm not going to do it. But I don't know why that would have happened. And then about 6 weeks in, I began to feel this overwhelming grief. My father had died while I was using, and I'd left my partner, and I hadn't processed any of those things. I guess because all of a sudden I was walking around the block again and again and again. It always seemed to be raining when I was getting clean, and just being not able to deal with the pain of those losses, and then around the same time, I guess around 2 months after my last use up, I thought, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'd pilfered, I'd stolen money, I'd done all sorts of things to sort of keep myself going, and it had all run out. I didn't have anything, totally randomly, someone I didn't really know very well said he was having a birthday party, and why didn't I come?
Right.
So I went to the birthday party, and I remember having the thought, well, if I just stay at home, nothing's going to change. So anyway, I went to this birthday party and I sat next to a woman I'd never met in my life before. And she said, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm an actor, but I'm not working at the moment. And I don't know if I still want to do it, but I don't quite know how I'm going to earn a living. And I've got to pay bills and I don't know how I'm going to do it. And it all sort of tumbled out a bit. Mm. And she said, oh, I'm a managing director of a publishing company. She said, well, come and I've got some temp jobs you can do. Why don't you come and just find me on Facebook and I'll get you some temp work. And she was true to her word.
Wow.
And I worked there for 2 years.
Wow.
I worked there for 2 years, yeah. And here's the kicker. I worked in the Water, Sewerage and Waste magazine.
Right.
Yeah. And I sold advertising space, which I tell you was a tough call.
I bet.
Yeah. There's not a lot
sounds like a tough gig.
Yeah.
The waste disposal gig sounds a tough gig.
It was a tough gig. There's not a lot of people wanted to advertise in it. But I stayed there for 2 years and thank God for it. And it gave me somewhere to go in the morning. It gave me a tiny income. It gave me a purpose. And gave me a bit of self-respect. And for the first week, I got paid weekly. I remember buying a shirt from Primark because I didn't really have the clothes to work in an office. And I did think my life was over. I thought, that's it then. That's me. And I thought, wow, it really wasn't very much money. And I imagined, I suppose I'll do this until I'm too old to do this. But that's not what happened. That isn't what ended up happening. But there was a moment, you talk about the rock bottom. The rock bottom was when I realised I'd messed it all up. I'd messed it all up. I'd lost my home, I'd lost my partner, I'd lost my career, I'd lost my friends, I'd lost all love and all hope in my life. That was the rock bottom.
Yeah. Robert, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I mean, you took us on such a descriptive journey there, and I mean, wow, what an inspiration you are to, if anyone is listening to this who's going through a serious drug addiction, if anyone's proof that you can turn it around, you're sat right in front of me. Was it 10 years ago you said your last?
It's actually just under, it's a bit over 9.5 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, pretty close to it. Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. I think statistically it's one of the hardest drugs to recover from, and for you to now live such a successful, happy, living the light life, you've really done a complete 360, and I hugely congratulate you, and I thank you so much for coming on here and to help others with your story. It's highly commendable. I really appreciate it. There's obviously quite a bit to unpack there, and I just want to frame, just for the listeners and viewers that might not know a lot about, meth and crystal meth. I think if someone's listening to this, say, in Australia maybe, or America or the Czech Republic or one of these countries where meth use is much more prevalent, they might know a bit more about it. I know it's on the increase in the UK, and obviously there's a lot of people that use it in the UK, but it seems to go a little bit under the radar. From my perspective, I mean, that might not be the reality, of course. So I've just got a few facts about meth, if that's all right, just to help the viewers along. So it's got some nicknames: Crank. You might have heard it referred to as Crank or Glass or Ice. Tina. In the US, there's over 1 million users a month, and like I said, there's high rates in Asia, Australia, and the Czech Republic, but all over the world. However, in the UK, they estimate where people take 1 million people have taken cocaine in the last year. They estimate 11,000 took meth, but I would imagine that's much higher because people aren't going to be reporting it. Crystal meth refers to a unique form of methamphetamine and refers specifically to the high potency type of meth that looks like rocks or glass-like shards. Although some people may use the term crystal meth and meth interchangeably, crystal meth is a much more specific term that refers to the crystal meth subtype. If I'm getting any of this wrong, please correct me. Meth is also similar to amphetamine or speed, but causes a greater high, and it's more likely to cause addiction, is much stronger, as it's able to cross the blood-brain barrier more effectively. And like you said, the effects can last for days. Obviously, that's quite a journey going from sort of childhood to injecting crystal meth. I think the kind of stereotype around sort of drug use, particularly when I was growing up, would be, you have a cigarette and then maybe you take alcohol and then you smoke weed, and then parents start to worry that that's going to progress to all of the other ones. Could I ask you just to take us through that journey? You don't necessarily have to dip into your childhood, but in terms of how it escalated to that, I know that moment that you described very precisely about smoking it, and then it wasn't long till you were injecting it. But I just wondered, pre-meth, what was your sort of journey like to get there?
I was always in trouble, really. I always in trouble. I think from 16, I was always the one. At school parties, there's always someone being sick in a bucket. It was always me. It was always me. I never knew when to stop.
Right.
And eventually I stopped being sick in a bucket, and I managed to, sort of hold it down and drink vast quantities. And that went on all through my 20s. And that was my sort of go-to drug of choice. And of course I dabbled in other stuff. But I was so happy with alcohol that I was a bit scared, actually, of other drugs. And of course I tried cocaine, and I remember thinking, wow, this is really scary. It's really scary. I remember a whole night going and just like that.
Yeah.
And yes, I tried speed, and yes, I smoked weed, but really, I did do those things, but really, my day-to-day love was for booze, and it did happen every day. There was no day off. It happened every day.
Okay.
And I did sort of notice, I sort of clocked that if I went to someone's house, I'd started by bringing one bottle of wine. And certainly by the end of the drink, I was bringing 3 bottles of wine.
Right.
And I stopped that successfully when I was 28, 29.
Wow. Okay.
29, I think it was. I stopped drinking altogether, and it was interesting because I think that unleashed all sorts of weird sort of mental health stuff that I didn't know I had. The minute I stopped drinking, I realised just how susceptible I was to things like jealousy and these jealous rages I'd get myself in, and really, really kind of unhappy person I realised I was without the booze to.
And were you sort of using alcohol to sort of calm those thoughts down?
Well, I didn't think I even knew I had them. Really.
Right, I see.
Yeah,
gotcha.
It wasn't really till I stopped drinking that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I became my obsessive thinking. I became all of a sudden it was like having a washing machine. It was just going round, round, round. I could think about anything, and I could sort of resent. I'll go to the post office and I'll resent all the way up to the post office about whatever it may have been. Often about my father, actually, just stuff that would just come up, and so it wasn't. Giving up the booze brought all of that. I mean, I stopped having hangovers, and I could open my front door without shaking. But yes, I did all of a sudden have to deal with that stuff and go down that journey. And then I don't think I had any mind-altering drink or drug for 15 years.
Wowzers!
From once I stopped to picking up the crystal meth, which as I said, was we met on an app, and he came round, and next thing I knew, he had his little pipe out. And
so in that 15 years, you had absolutely nothing, and then the first drug you picked up was crystal meth, yes. And smoking it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And he sort of, I'm not blaming it on him, but it seemed so normal the way he said, "Oh no, have you got a lighter?" He said, and I remember I didn't have a lighter, so he used my gas in the hob, and he lit his pipe on that, and then he said, and I remember having it and thinking, it's all right. Oh, I don't know, it didn't seem to me, but I had no idea how I was kind of hooked in from that moment, really. But I definitely was, because I then started sort of stalking people online, as I said, looking at the ones that looked likely to be taking drugs. There were little clues often in there.
Right.
Their little biogs that implied that that's what was going on. And those were the ones I went for. And as I say, within...
So it sort of went hand in hand with other things.
It went hand in hand with sex, definitely.
Got you.
Yeah.
Right. I think the term is it chem sex? Is that the word
right.
where it's sort of, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine after 15 years of not using anything, it must have been incredibly powerful, that effect.
Oh, yeah. I remember feeling so happy that I'd found it. And because I'd always acknowledged that I did have a drink problem, I told myself the lie that, well, you see, my problem's with drink, not with drugs.
Right, gotcha.
I remember absolutely saying that to myself. Drugs are fine. The booze, stay away from. Drugs are fine. And I remember feeling sort of elated that I'd found this new friend. Well, it started to go wrong really, really quickly. Really, really quickly. For me, it did. I mean, I always say, you can't be pregnant a little bit. I don't think you can inject crystal meth a little bit. I think once you're doing that, I can't speak for anyone else, but I was in trouble. There was no way back from that. It was not going to end well.
Yeah.
I just didn't know that at the time, but that's what I think now. I think I didn't stand a chance. It was completely overwhelmed me, the whole obsession with it. And it's a euphoria that I don't in any way want to say it's make it sound attractive, but it's a euphoria the like of which I've never felt before or since. And I'll always know that. I'll always know that's there. But the devastation it caused in my life so quickly, it's made me pretty resolved that that's not something I'll ever do again. But I have to be vigilant. Even now, I don't hang around people that are taking drugs. I don't hang around in pubs. I just don't. I don't want to. I don't want to take that risk.
Gotcha. And from, you may have already explained this, and I missed it. But how long was it from you smoking it in that incident to you injecting it? What was that progression like?
I mean, it was really quick.
Yeah.
Given that I was a newcomer. I'm really hazy about the chronology, and that was to do with the drug. But I reckon 3 months.
Wow. And is it because the high was so intense that when you sort of, I guess you were smoking it regularly after that point? I might have got that wrong. Did your tolerance start? Did your tolerance start to go up fairly quickly, and so that high was not as powerful? And is that why the injecting then became so appealing, because the smoking was kind of losing its effect? Was it that, or was it just?
No, the effect of injecting it or slamming as it's called, is it's then there's nothing. It's nothing like smoking. It's nothing like smoking. It hits your blood in a way that smoking it is a gentle. Gently you start feeling intoxicated. But when you injected it, it hits you like a. You feel it instantly, and you feel a sort of a rush that comes over you, and
nothing. No part of the body has to process it. It's just boom, isn't it?
Yeah,
just straight to the brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember that moment where you made that decision, or was it hazy? Was there sort of a moment with your prefrontal cortex where you were sort of going, this could be risky, and I'm going to make this decision, or did it just sort of happen? I hate to use this word, organically, as part of the process of the journey you're on with that?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question to me, because I can remember the moment very, very clearly. I remember where I was. I remember who I was doing it with, and. I can't believe how quickly I melted. Not melted. My resolve went, because at first I said, "Well, of course not. That's not something I'll ever do." And he persevered. He said, "No, it's fine. I'll do it. I'll show you how to do it. No, it's fine. No, it's really nice." I had no resistance at all. I really didn't put up a fight, and I always question that. I think, why? If someone told me to step in front of a bus, would I do that? If someone told me, I don't know. I'd already been smoking it that evening, so it wasn't like I was thinking particularly straight. I really fancied him, and I think that had a bearing on it.
Sure.
I think I wanted to, I was quite pleased to be there with him. And, he seemed to know what he was doing. But yeah, I didn't really put up a fight for very long. I can remember saying, oh, well, let's do it, next week or something like that. And he said, no, let's do it now. I've got the stuff. Yeah, I'll show you. And that was it.
Yeah.
And then out came all the paraphernalia and off we went.
Mm. I think what's interesting here, just to frame it, is I think someone that doesn't know much about drugs, who's listening to this, they might have a kind of an idea that crystal meth is like one of the worst ones in existence. But actually, consistently across the board, doesn't matter sort of where you try to get your stats, alcohol always actually comes in at the front. And I think it's important to say that. But obviously, once you, I think it's generally sort of conceded that it's alcohol, heroin, crack, then meth. That seems to be the sort of top four. But then I would imagine that once you inject, the risks then become higher. I think just as a cautionary tale for anyone listening to this, I'm just going to list some of the risks, if that's all right. I just think it's important if someone's listening to this, and it can lead to chronic patterns of abuse compared to other methods because of the way the drug is delivered directly into the bloodstream. And some of the consequences can be abscesses, another localized skin infection due to non-sterilized equipment, unsafe injection use, and contamination. Something can happen called, I hope I can say this right, endocarditis, which is inflammation of the lining of the heart chambers. Obviously, cocaine can do something similar. The use of improperly sterilized needles can also increase the risk of bacterial infection. There's also a risk around HIV, hepatitis B and C, and liver and kidney disease as well. Something called wound botulism, which is a life-threatening illness that can be caused by a type of bacteria which contaminates a wound. There's also an increased risk of overdose. So obviously, once you inject, it's quite high risk, and I'm sure anyone listening to this wouldn't be tempted to try it. And I think it's important that we say that. But what strikes me, Robert, and I might be wrong, you don't strike me as a high risk person.
I know.
you strike me as someone very considered, and you are kind of the antithesis of any kind of stereotypical meth user that I could imagine. But yet this is your story, and I think this is the stereotype, isn't it, around drug and alcohol misuse, that it's a certain type. It can literally happen to anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I when all those years I struggled with alcohol, I didn't truly believe that I might be an alcoholic. I just couldn't really. What, me? Surely not. And it wasn't until I realised I couldn't stop injecting myself with crystal meth, I thought, oh no, yes, you are an addict. Yes, there's no doubt about that now. There was something, I think once I'd accepted that, it was easy. When I was getting clean, that was a helpful thought to think, oh no, I belonged to that title. I found it helpful. Not everyone else would, a lot of people. But I needed to believe it. Once I finally believed it, then I kind of, it helped me in a weird way, accepting that.
Yeah, because then you could do something about it and sort of move forward with it. I think probably an image that some people would have of someone who's addicted to crystal meth would be that kind of horrible stereotype of, maybe no teeth and sort of paranoid and shaking. And I just wondered, in your time of using it, what were the other meth users that you met? Did they fall into that stereotype, or were they sort of a cross mix of society?
I mean, I lost 3 teeth.
Right.
I had tons of abscesses and that you mentioned earlier. So all that did happen to me.
Okay.
And is that what they look like? Some of them look pretty rough. Yeah, some of them look pretty rough. It's interesting that all these people that were really important to me at the time, these people I used with, I never heard from one of them ever again. It wasn't like they were texting me like, "Hey guys, I've I've given it up, I just need to take a break. And literally, the minute I stopped contacting them, I never heard from them again. So there was no love, there was no community as such. Did they look like that? Certainly not all of them. Some of them looked like they'd passed as a perfectly ordinary member of society. Some of them looked a bit rough, and some of them you thought, I used to think, well, like me, wouldn't be able to function in the real world because they lived this weird parallel life, sort of drug-taking life. But, some people held down jobs. I met doctors that did it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the work I do in rehabs, it can be literally any job, to the most important sometimes, all the way through. There's something you said in the first question when you were talking about your rock bottom. You sort of alluded to the fact that you didn't, you mentioned about sort of a job coming through, an audition coming through, and you're hoping it would be a smaller part. I just wanted to probe you a bit on that because there's nothing on your CV anyway that would make me believe for a second that you could ever doubt your acting ability or your strength as a performer. But it sounds like that there was a little voice somewhere that was telling you that you weren't talented or good enough to do this. Where did that come from? Was that because of the drugs you were using, or was that sort of something that was already there, do you think?
Oh, that's already there. I mean, I live with that daily. I still think it's a very elusive thing. I've never had much self-confidence about it. It's always surprised me when I have landed jobs and stuff.
Okay.
But that feeling that I had when I was taking drugs it was a whole next level thing. Because, I still suffer hugely with lack of self-confidence. But there's a drive in me that really wants it. And so, I can be upset because I haven't got a job or whatever. But I get back on the horse again. And if anything else comes through, I try there's something I want, I really want it. But I lost that when I was using. And right.
It exaggerated it. It made it worse. So maybe that's addiction's way of saying we'll carry on doing it.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine acting when I was using at all. I couldn't imagine that I wouldn't be sort of frightened and self-conscious, or I just couldn't see it anymore. I couldn't see. Whereas now I absolutely see it. If I get a script in front of me, I connect to it instantly. But that went, and I think it. I would say that I lost all love and hope, and I sort of think, I don't know, whatever acting is really, it's difficult to explain what it is, but I certainly lost, the ability to put myself in another person's shoes and imagine what that would feel like. I just couldn't do it anymore, and I just thought I wasn't an actor. That's what I just didn't think I was an actor anymore.
I think addiction just robs you of all sense of self, doesn't it? It just completely sort of gets you in this zone of you're just wrapped up in whatever the thing is. And I can imagine that sense of being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes when you're so in a grip of something must feel almost inaccessible. In that moment.
And it stayed with me for certainly the first year of being clean. Because I did get a few auditions in the first year of being clean, and in truth, I thought, I can't do it. And the fear was, what am I going to do instead? I really didn't think I'd ever do it again. I didn't think I'd ever act again. In that first year of recovery, I thought, no, I'm never going to act again.
And what was that like when you were using? Were you sort of honest with your representatives, or how did you sort of manage those 3 years? How did you sort of do any sense of damage control?
Well, I was between representatives because you become. I remember I moved on from my agent at the time, without having anywhere else to go to. It was a really bleak, looking back, and an embarrassing time, really. So no, there was no need to to have any of those conversations with anyone, really.
How do you find the industry in general affects your mental health, either for good or bad? And I guess when I say the word mental health, I guess in your context, what I'm referring to is potentially relapse. What bits of the industry do you find, obviously working is great.
Great.
It's a big buzz. And I'm certainly not anti the industry. You know, this isn't a podcast that's anti-industry, but it is really challenging. Is there certain aspects of the industry that you find particularly difficult to kind of navigate through? The sort of uncertainty, the lack of job security, that kind of inner voice that says, you know, you're not good enough, even though you're nominated for Olivier's and things like that. Anything around that is a challenge going forward for you?
It's really easy to compare yourself to others in the acting industry because it's very evident. You know, some people have, you know, stellar careers, so it already, you know, if you have a tendency to think badly of yourself, that's quite easy to do. And I suppose it highlights the differences. It's very clear that someone is more successful than you are. Be it because they play bigger parts or they're, you know, they're household names or whatever it may be, you know. So yeah, that's a difficult thing for any human being to deal with, I think. But I think it's turned up a little bit with us because it's so obvious. You just turn on the television, you go, oh, there's him again.
Right.
Yeah. I remember when we started out and we were both exactly the same. Now his name is above the title.
Right.
You know, stuff like that. It is difficult to handle. You've got to keep quite a strong hold on yourself, not to run away with that.
How do you do that? How do you?
Well, often I fail, but right. I find all sorts of things help that. Because I don't do it naturally. I have to get help to do those things.
Yeah, yeah.
I find meditating astonishingly helpful. And I never thought I'd be that guy. I never thought I'd be that guy. I used to hear people go on about it. And I tried it in, you know, my 20s and stuff. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't.
Same.
What's supposed to happen? Wait, is this it? Am I doing it? I just didn't know what it was. But I do it every day now. And it gives me a perspective on my life and me and a gratitude.
Yeah.
And I can still feel a little, you know, someone gets something that I really wanted or again, the whole thing of someone that I started out with being really famous yet again. That can be difficult, but it definitely helps get that in perspective for me, and I certainly don't dwell on it. And the other thing I do that I find really beneficial, and I think it's the same sort of territory, is yoga. I think yoga, and I'm not very good at yoga. I'm not bendy or any of those things you're supposed to be with yoga. But so I can get quite frustrated with myself. I can't even touch my toes. But it's not about that. There are moments in a class when I find the peace that I find in meditating, and I get a sense of perspective, and those things help me.
I think as well, I don't know if you'd agree, but I think addiction is a lot about sort of a disconnect to the world around you and yourself, and I think comparison by its nature is about finding what's separate, isn't it? It's like what makes me not connected to the universal, this person, or you know, and you know, we often use one metric when we compare, and like you say with acting, it's very easy to do. You just got to turn on your TV, but I mean, I can tell you straight off the bat, your CV's better than mine. So there you go. You can feel yourself better than that, right there.
Though, does it?
But there's lots of metrics, isn't there? We could use shoe sizes. I don't know what shoe size you are.
9.
Well, see, I'm a 10, you see. And if I believe that shoe size is
yes,
something to aspire to, but in all seriousness, I might look at someone on the TV who's got a part I wanted, but, have they got more compassion than I have? Have they got more empathy than I have? Well, obviously I'll never know. But I suppose you always win and lose in all metrics, right? But you'll always win in some.
It's just not I don't think for me it's helpful to go there at all. To rate myself in any way at better or worse than anyone else. It's not helpful. I try to not do it at all.
Yeah. Is there something in the old adage of only compare yourself to yourself in the terms of, is that a good metric for you? I.e., am I doing better than I was yesterday? Is that a useful comparison for you?
That's a really useful comparison.
Right.
It's a really useful comparison.
Okay.
And actually, I don't really do that. That's quite interesting. Yeah. No, that's really helpful. Yeah. And there are things that in my life that I'm doing much, much better than I've ever done them before. To be able to soothe myself when I'm upset or frightened about something, rather than reaching for someone else to do it for me, to help me with it, or a cake or a drink or whatever it may be, reaching for other things. I'm learning to do it to myself now, and I never would have thought I could have done that.
Yeah.
I like the idea of it. I always like the idea of it. I used to think, how do you do that? But I am learning to do that.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back a step in order to be able to jump to the next step, if that kind of makes sense. Just wanted to go back briefly to when you were in active addiction for meth. Did other things come in, or was your recovery predominantly from meth? Or I'm sort of imagining during that period that, alcohol came back in and everything else. Or were you mainly on that ride?
No, alcohol never came in. I stopped drinking when I was 28, 29. I've never had an alcoholic drink from that day to this.
Wow. Okay.
And I think because I was always scared of it.
Yeah.
I was always scared of it. Even when I was off my face, I was scared of it. On crystal meth, I was frightened of alcohol. It was ridiculous because, the crystal meth took me a lot lower, a lot quicker. But there's all sorts of things you take along with crystal meth in that chemsex environment. There's this thing called GBH, which may or may not be a aeroplane engine cleaner, but
GHB, yeah.
GHB, not GBH. That's grievous bodily harm, isn't it? Yes, so you'd have that.
Yeah.
And there was various other weird drugs that the things that didn't cut it compared to the mighty crystal meth.
Yeah.
So I used to not really bother with those much, but there were other things. Yeah.
What do you think it is about you in that moment where you went, "I'm done"? I know there was another person with you that gave you this warning about the stroke. I think School of Rock Bottom really is about, what is it about that rock bottom that teaches you something to then, go on to live this great life. I hope you agree with this assessment, and I'm hoping that you would say this yourself. But for me, looking in from the outside, it proves that you're a survivor and that you've got the fighting spirit to get where you were with crystal meth and then to turn it round. To me, is concrete proof that you're a survivor and you had to dig really deep to go, no, this isn't going to be the end of my story. Would you sort of go down that road?
Well, I wish I could, because what you described was a sort of movie. You see the moment, the glint in the eye, because never again will I do that. It wasn't like that. It was, I heard through the haze someone saying they were going to stop it, someone that I'd used with a lot, and I absolutely felt like it gave me permission, which suggested to me that I wanted to stop.
Yeah.
I wanted to stop for some time. But somehow by him saying this, and God bless him, so glad he did, it gave me permission to stop as well. But I was never blessed with a determination, a zeal. I didn't feel like that at all. It didn't feel like that. It felt hopeless.
Yeah.
And the craving went on forever.
But yet, if you don't mind me saying, because you are the author of your story, not me, your actions sort of prove otherwise.
Yeah.
Because you then went on to describe a period that was incredibly mentally challenging, but yet you didn't relapse.
I tell you what helped me. It was this thing of getting to bed without taking a drug. And I could hold on to that. I found that helpful. That however crazy and awful I felt, although there was a big problem with sleeping at first actually as well. That was a really, really big thing, which went on for months. But I remember if I could get to bedtime, which would often be quite early,
yeah,
I'd felt safe from that moment. If I could turn the light off and go, I did it. And that's what got me. I sort of lurched from day to day that way. And someone had said, "Oh well, perhaps you can use tomorrow, but just make sure you don't use today." And that was helpful. That was really helpful I suppose to divide my life into small chunks of a day at a time. That was the only thing I held on to, but I certainly didn't feel. What you described was powerful. I didn't feel powerful at all. I felt completely powerless, actually. Yeah. And really frightened. Once I'd got... The first 2 weeks were awful because I didn't have anything to hang on to. And bit of me thought, well, why don't I just go back to it? I can start the clock again. That was really, really difficult. But once I'd got beyond my usual kind of 2 weeks and I was in new territory, then I became really hyper-vigilant about not...
There's something in that haze bit there that's driving you to that midnight, I wonder if it's your passion for performing. I wonder if there was something in the back of your mind that was going, there's something much better for me on the other side of this.
But that's I had no hope. I genuinely had no hope. I'm not... I wish I could. I wish I'd say, I had a dream. It wasn't that. I didn't want to be an actor anymore. I didn't think I could do it. I genuinely... I don't know. It's like I became in competition with myself or something. When I'm 14 days clean today, let's see if I can make it 15.
Your competitive spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was... And I got a little counter thing. You can get an app counter that tells you how many days you've been off it. And I guess I sort of fetishized that a little bit. It was things like that kept me going. But certainly there was no... Because there was nothing to drive me forward. I had no hope.
Unfortunately, we're nearly out of time, but I'd like to get one more question in. And this could be tricky, but I'd like you to imagine that somebody... It could be meth, it could be heroin, it could be crack, it could be coke, it could be alcohol, it could be anything. But if someone's listening to this now and they're in that place of hopelessness that you just described, and maybe they've come across this podcast out of curiosity or by accident or maybe quite deliberately to try and find in the haze something to cling on to.
Yeah.
If that person's listening to this right now, which I really hope they are, what would you say to them in that moment of feeling hopeless?
I would say, try to get to bed tonight without having a drug, and then worry about tomorrow, and to promise. I get emotional now, and to promise them that hope will return. If you keep on getting to bed without taking a drug, things get better. And I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that would happen to me. I never thought it would happen to me. And they got so much better so quickly just by getting to bed without having a drug. And that's what I'd say is, if you could believe that, just believe that a day becomes 2 days, becomes a week, becomes a month, becomes 6 months. But it only happens if you get to bed tonight without having a drug.
Wow. Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much. And what I'm going to do is in the show notes, signpost to a couple of places that may be useful if you're ready to go on a journey with this, and this resonates, or maybe you've got friends and family that this resonates with as well, or colleagues. Like we highlighted at the beginning, it literally can happen to anyone. But it's been a real privilege to listen to you for the last hour, Robert, and I'm sure, like me, you've got this overwhelming sense of hope that no matter how desperate things appear or become, that there is definitely a way out and a way through it. So thanks again, Robert.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for asking. It's nice.
It's been a pleasure as well. I've not seen you in many years. It's great to catch up with you as well. And like I say, we are out of time, but as promised, there'll be an episode every 2 weeks on a Tuesday. And please like, subscribe, share, review it. Apparently that's really important. Please review it, but only if you're going to give it 5 stars, of course. And tell everyone about it. And thank you so much for tuning in. And I will see you again in 2 weeks' time. See you soon and take care. Thank you.